Today we're going to take a look at the Marvel Spider-Man sequel, and we're talking about the real sequel here, so there's no way to actually get out of this one. A lot of people, when I talk about Miles, they're like, it's not actually a sequel, that is a midquel spin-off. Yeah, pretty much, but it's, So now we're actually looking at 2, Marvel Spider-Man 2, and where we want to see that go, what we want to see out of the game. I'm here today with Evan Filarca. He has his own YouTube channel, massive in the Spider-Man community, one of the founders of the Spidey Squad.
That's very kind of you to say. It's just a group effort for the Spidey Squad. We were in love with the first game. Miles was fantastic and a great stepping stone to the future of the universe for Marvel games in general, but mainly for this Spider-Man franchise that so many people are enthralled with. And of course, what they set up for the post-credit scene in both Marvel Spider-Man 1 and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales is a clear indication, even though it hasn't been officially announced yet, that of course, down the line, we are going to get Marvel Spider-Man 2 with the symbiote and great story concepts like Harry as possibly Venom and Norman Osborn as Green Goblin and Yuri Watanabe as Wraith, and just filling in all the blanks to expand this universe even further with great story points and great character portrayals within Insomniac's portrayal of the Spider-Man realm is going to be so cool to see. And hopefully, if this is only exclusive to the PlayStation 5 instead of being a cross-gen game like Miles was on PS4 and PS5, I think that is a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's going to be one of those things that's, if for some reason it's controversial. I noticed it too when Alex from Podcast Now pointed that out with a couple games like Horizon, where it's, look, it's a good thing to include the wider swath of gamers in your game, especially early on in next gen. But the problem is that at a certain point, you nullify the purpose to there being a next generation of consoles, especially because the PS4 and Xbox One, they're great consoles, but the technology was slightly outdated when it launched compared to PC already. I know that's not a fair comparison, but it's just true. So you're already looking at, tech that was a little bit outdated way back. And now if we're having Spider-Man 2 on PS4 and PS5, you're saying, hey, this box from almost 10 years ago has to be able to play it well, but also give me a reason to buy it on this one that came out last year. I think that you need to find, I guess, a middle ground on that. And I think the middle ground on that is to release, maybe the next game on both like they did with Miles, but I don't think you should keep that going after that. I think you kind of need to pick where you want this to go to push the tech of the game itself. And I've made this point before, if Marvel's Spider-Man had also launched on PS3, it would not be the game that everybody knows and loves, unless they, made an entirely separate version of it from the ground up, and nobody has the money or time to do that anymore. This is not the Sega Genesis and SNES console days. It's, you have to account for the lowest common denominator when making these games.
Correct. And it's really interesting that that's brought up because of specifically what one of the heads at Sony have brought up about this particular aspect for game development is Jim Ryan, CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment, has gone on record saying us as gamers will not be able to actually acquire these full-on next-gen experiences on PlayStation 5 only games until year of 2022 or 2023 arrives for these titles. That is also the case with God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West, where under the assumption of that game in particular, that is going to be cross-gen for PS4 and PS5. It's unknown for sure right now for God of War Ragnarok, but again, there's going to be a lot of AAA PlayStation exclusive titles that are going to be exclusive on different PlayStation platforms for the PS4 and PS5, as well as PS4 Pro, if you want to count that one. But the first glimpse in particular for Insomniac that we are going to receive of their first ever PlayStation-only title is actually going to be Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. That game is coming out later this year in 2021, and that is only going to be exclusive to the PS5 because that game can only run on next-gen hardware with the SSD loading times, the graphic capabilities, the seamless transition from different dimensions and warping through worlds, that type of concept that the game has. And hopefully, if Marvel and Sony and Insomniac are smart enough, they're going to apply that same type of knowledge and mindset into where they can take the sequel for Marvel Spider-Man, not just with how the world could load faster with fast traveling and stuff like that, but also graphic capabilities, performances with the characters, gameplay mechanics with certain elements of the gameplay like web swinging, and of course, what I'm really hoping to see is a brand new, completely different style of combat once Peter is wearing the black suit. I think that is the key factor that is going to differentiate this game from Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales. Miles Morales already did a great job on expanding what Spider-Man PS4 set forth with the web swinging, with new and fresh air tricks, as well as different combat abilities with the Venom unique prowess style of Miles fighting in combat, trying to sneak up on enemies with the camouflage abilities. So there is a lot of really cool perspectives and techniques that Insomniac can apply for Peter compared to Miles, and how that can elevate even further for Peter is the use of the black suit. Are they going to make it crazy and stylistic like Web of Shadows or Shattered Dimensions, or something a bit more grounded like what we saw in, funny enough, the Spider-Man 3 movie tie-in game, where he didn't really use attacks with tendrils, but he was just stronger, faster, and more aggressive when fighting enemies during combat scenarios? And if they apply that same perspective into Peter the black suit here for the game, I think that is going to be a huge drawing point in comparison to the first game. The reason why Spider-Man PS4, that particular game, sold so well in the first place, because of the recent statistic announcement of it selling over 20 million copies worldwide, is because it was a completely fresh and unique take on Spider-Man, while also delivering what people want to see in a Spider-Man game to perfection. A great open world, really stylized combat, awesome side missions, great characters, and just a fun experience as a whole. And seeing how great Insomniac have handled the Spider-Man games so far with Peter and Miles' own stories, I think that we can definitely expect that to return here for the sequel in just extremely interesting ways on how they can incorporate the symbiote, the storyline for Peter and Miles, now both as Spider-Man together, and how that can evolve even further within this universe while introducing new characters to the story.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, it's going to come down to how they actually want to incorporate that suit well. I'm sure that we won't see something in terms of Web of Shadows. I'm sure we won't see something like the insane, I guess I would say, decision system, where maybe one day you're tearing Wolverine in half and the next day maybe you're making out with Black Cat over MJ's grave. Who knows? I highly doubt that we will see that level of decision-making type stuff, but the reason for that is because Insomniac wants to tell a tightly knit story that goes ahead and continues in a canon direction. The decision becomes more about how you play the game and less about actual choices, because they have to carry forward a continuity in these games. We saw that in the first game, we saw that in Miles, and I would expect to see that in this one too. But I guess getting into that, what do you actually want to see out of the black suit? Because I do think that you could allow for decision making with the suit in terms of how much you want to use it, because we already have that with all kinds of suits. Maybe there are, certain missions where it's like, no, this is the black suit, you need to use it. Like, especially the first mission where you would get it in the game or have the symbiote at all. I would totally understand that, but I do think it could add to that player agency if you were able to maybe have perks to putting on the black suit that maybe are also negatives, compared to the normal one. Maybe you're more weak against fire. Maybe they have fire-based enemies, or maybe there's some kind of sonic thing or something like that, sound. Or maybe, you're slower, but you're way stronger. I think that kind of thing, and giving you choice over how you utilize it in combat, would definitely be the way to go mechanics wise. But I wanted to hear, I guess, your thoughts on that.
I'm one of those rebels who decided to play with the black suit right off the bat in Web of Shadows, where they gave you the option to choose from the red suit to the black suit. I wore that baby nonstop in my first playthrough when I initially played the game in 2008. It was fantastic, because that is one of, if not my main favorite suits from Spider-Man lore of all time. And hearing Brian Intihar specifically discuss how they plan on going forward with the series just gets me beyond hyped. If you guys don't know, Brian Intihar is the main creative director of the first Spider-Man game, and then Brian Horton was the creative director of Miles Morales. So it is confirmed that Brian Intihar leading the future into the Insomniac Spider-Man franchise with Marvel's Spider-Man 2 down the line. He is going to be leading the project, and what he specifically said about it in a previous podcast / spoiler discussion with Greg Miller back when the first game came out on Kind of Funny, he said that the reason why the suit is not in the game is because it deserves its own story, because it's one of the best stories within Spider-Man lore, and he wants to tell it in the way that Insomniac will want to go about telling the narrative for that particular attire. In this universe, Harry is sick. The symbiote is trying to, I am assuming, heal him, just like it kind of was meant for in the Ultimate Comics universe. So story-wise, they're already going in a completely unique direction with how they're going to incorporate the symbiote, more in the sense of the Ultimate-style version of its origins, where it's kind of this bio-organic, man-made material instead of an alien from outer space. And I think that is going to be so intriguing to see exactly how that could be incorporated into Harry's character versus what people may want to see with that of Eddie Brock. We do know that Eddie Brock exists within this universe. Him and Peter worked at the Daily Bugle together, and they actually left him a goodbye farewell card in one of the Easter eggs in the backpacks. But they're clearly hinting at both with the first game and Miles Morales that Harry is most likely going to be the one who is going to eventually become Venom somehow in this game's world. Actually seeing him as a main role in the sequel is going to be extremely interesting to see pan out, and how the symbiote can transfer, of course, from him onto Peter, with him gaining the black suit and the powers that come along with it, and then most likely going back onto Harry, turning him into Venom. Or however they go about approaching that storyline is going to be one of the most insanely intriguing aspects about the game as a whole. For gameplay, if they just end up making Spider-Man 2 on PS5 like Web of Shadows 2, I'll be more than happy. Just go all out with the crazy symbiote powers. If they decide to do like a morality system, like you can choose to wear the suit and do certain things in a good or bad way, like Infamous or, again, Web of Shadows in that type of regard, that would be super cool. I'd be down for that. But given how Insomniac clearly has their own direction of where they want to take this narrative for themselves, I don't necessarily think that that might be a gameplay mechanic that they will input into the game. But what I can see is that hopefully if a game in 2008 can seamlessly transition you from the red suit to the black suit on the press of a button, I would expect a game with the power of the PS5 in 2022 or 2023, whenever the game decides to release, they could probably pull that off even better if they go for it. But how they decide to actually incorporate it with different upgrades for the red suit and the black suit, traversal options, and also story perspectives for how Peter is going to struggle with the symbiote as a whole is getting me as a fan beyond hype. And I can't wait to see how that all plays out in full fruition by the time it comes out, hopefully only on the PS5, to make the best experience possible with the technology that they have at their disposal. And that's what intrigues me the most as a fan, is because I love this universe so much due to the fact that we've seen things that have never been done before within Spider-Man lore. Just seeing Peter help Otto build the tentacles, becoming Dr. Octopus throughout the entirety of the story of Spider-Man PS4 drew me in from the get-go, because I knew what they were doing the second that they showed the silhouette of Otto in his lab, and it's like, oh my god, you're actually doing this. This is insane, but I love it. And Miles Morales making Tinkerer a friend of mine instead of the old, seedy old black arms dealer that you see in some comics, just helping upgrade the villains of Spider-Man's rogues gallery and doing something different with that as well. That's also new and fresh and appealing for fans who may not know about the character as much of the Tinkerer, but doing something unique and different that draws in the story to a whole new level. And now what's so great about this is because the story has already been set up in both games, where Harry is now going to come out of the Nickelodeon Gak tank that we see him in the two games, and he's going to be coming out in the sequel with the symbiote on him, maybe even giving him some powers if he becomes Venom knowingly and uses that to his advantage or something. Maybe the symbiote will go on to Norman at some point. We have no clue. They could do anything that they want to within this universe, and it would be insane to see exactly where they decide to go with this iconic storyline. The black suit represents everything that Spider-Man fights against. Power corrupts. Great power, great responsibility. But what if you have too much power to deal with all at once? What if the power controls you more than you can control it? And I love that element because it shows how good of a person Peter is to his core, and seeing that how he can overcome that challenge and tragedy with what the black suit usually entails, and turn that into triumph is just such a great thing to see from Spider-Man's character. And Insomniac knows that. And seeing what a great job they even did with characters like Dr. Octopus and the Tinkerer in both games, it really makes me as a fan get beyond hype to see what they could do with one of my favorite Spider-Man characters, Venom, and turn that upside down with Venom being Harry, a character that Peter knows as his best friend, who has been established in the first game throughout the entirety of it with the side missions and getting that connection between Peter and Harry, knowing that they were good pals throughout high school. And Peter was unaware that Harry was sick, and MJ told Peter about Harry's sickness, so they all kind of have this connection with each other. I know a lot of people want co-op, but if they can incorporate that properly, I would want it to be in there only if done right. I still want them to focus on the main single-player story with Peter and Miles. But if they can enhance the traversal further with the addition of the black suit, making you feel more fast and stronger while wearing it during combat and free roaming, that would be excellent. And I think Insomniac knows that full well and what they have to improve on from both games, and seeing that if they can incorporate that for wall crawling, traversal, wall running, and even some combat moves to make a bit more different in terms of stylizing and variations with your combat takedowns and gadget usage and air and ground takedowns with combat moves, I think that would be perfection. I just think as a fan, for me, I love everything about the black suit and what it represents for Peter and Spider-Man's character. And if they do something like that with how it's used in the comics, or just from what we know about it, mainly with like Back in Black, like what it represents from that one comic storyline for Peter is like everything he's fought against, and show that emotion through the story with the performances that we're going to eventually receive with Yuri Lowenthal as Peter Parker, Najee Jeter as Miles Morales. I forget his name, but the voice actor who's playing Harry Osborn, now getting, of course, even more time to shine in this sequel, is going to be insane. And if they do some interesting things like, oh, it's kind of more the same in terms of the gameplay, that'll be okay, because the gameplay is already wonderful in Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales, but the story is where I really want them to fully dive into some dark undertones with the symbiote and how that applies to Peter Parker and Spider-Man's character. Have it be a slow burn over time. Show the slow progression of Peter slowly becoming more and more dark, or more and more, not evil, but just kind of off tone from what we know Peter Parker to be from the first game, and Miles, all, lighthearted, but also serious, but also considering for others and being a hero that we can all relate to. And how that much power can affect someone so good with the use of the symbiote is what I want to see the most from the sequel. And I can't wait.
I completely agree. I'm so excited. I think I've said I completely agree 5 times, but I'm so excited to see this game and see where this series goes. It's really one of the crowning jewels of, I guess, console exclusivity. And I know that that bothers some people, especially on Xbox or PC. But this is one of the best games in terms of like, if a game is going to sell you a console, in my opinion, this series, God of War, these are some of the things that I really, really recommend to people. Like, hey, you don't want to miss out on these experiences. They're so well crafted. They're well done. They improve every time. I'm always excited for them. And I'm really happy to have you on today, Evan, and talk with you, because you as much as I'm excited for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, your excitement eclipses mine by a mile.
Thank you again for this amazing discussion.
Hey, man, thank you very much. And everybody, please check out Evan's channel. The links will be in the description down below. I will also most likely, like 99.9%, remember to do a pinned comment as well with his links. If I don't, it's in the description anyways. But OCD, ADHD, all that kind of stuff that I seem to have going up on in my head, undiagnosed, seems to be an issue for me remembering. Hey, by the way, other than just Evan's channel, which you also should check out, we have a lot of things going on over here as well. We have a secondary channel, Degenerate Plays, where we play through all kinds of games together. We are playing through Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales right now. We are nearing the end of the game, so a lot of fun stuff going on over there. If you're a Spidey fan or a fan of really just about anything, I love everything. I can't stop. Please, somebody stop me. Check that channel out. And hey, be sure to follow on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit. We've got a Discord. Evan has his own Twitter as well, and just a ton of stuff going on over there. We appreciate you very much. Have a fantastic day, everyone. And as always, stay shway.
Peace out, true believers.